Queen Elizabeth was a life well lived, a promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply in her passing.
For decades, the mystery surrounding Princess Diana's death and the silence from the British royal family cast a long shadow over the House of Windsor. When King Charles finally stepped forward with revelations, stark, unfiltered, and emotionally laden, it shattered the carefully maintained image of royal composure and discretion. This moment was not merely a personal reckoning, but a seismic event in the monarchy's history. As he stood before the world, stripped of the regal detachment that had defined him for so long, Charles transformed not just in the public eye, but also within the framework of royal legacy. The long-awaited truth, intertwined with his own struggle with cancer, painted a harrowing portrait of a man caught between public duty and private grief. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. When Princess Diana died in the early hours of August 31st, 1997, in a Paris tunnel, the official explanation offered was tragic but straightforward: a high-speed chase involving paparazzi and a drunk driver. Yet from the very beginning, suspicion and conspiracy followed the official narrative like a shadow. Millions around the world mourned her as the people's princess, and that global affection only intensified scrutiny. For years, Charles said little publicly, his silence interpreted by many as coldness or worse, complicity. The growing chasm between the public's affection for Diana and its disillusionment with the monarchy widened. But the truth, as Charles finally revealed, was not a matter of simplistic guilt or innocence. It was a complex web of personal anguish, institutional constraints, and the unbearable burden of being born into a family where emotions are often currency that must be suppressed. Charles's revelation was not an abrupt confession, but rather the culmination of a long internal battle. His account began not in the days after Diana's death, but in the months leading up to it, during which the relationship between him and Diana, by then officially divorced, remained strained yet strangely intimate. Their shared past, their children, and the media that haunted both of them had become an inseparable part of their lives. According to Charles, Diana had expressed increasing fear and suspicion during those final months. She believed she was being followed not only by paparazzi, but by forces she couldn't quite name. Charles admitted to dismissing some of her concerns at the time as paranoia brought on by the constant stress of media intrusion. It's a regret that, even years later, remains lodged deeply in his conscience. As he continued to unfold the timeline leading to that tragic night, Charles spoke of warnings he received from Diana herself. She feared that her life was in danger, and although she never explicitly accused anyone, her intuition, as he now believes, was not unfounded. Charles stopped short of implicating any specific institution or individual, but he made it clear that powerful interests had reasons to feel threatened by Diana's global influence. Her humanitarian work, particularly with landmines and AIDS awareness, had granted her a platform that rivaled that of heads of state. She was no longer merely a royal figure, but a political and cultural force. That, Charles explained, made her vulnerable in ways that even he had failed to comprehend until it was too late. He also confessed to his own paralysis, emotional, institutional, and moral, in the face of what he now recognizes as a slow-moving crisis. As he described the days before her final trip to Paris, it became evident that Charles, though no longer married to Diana, still carried a sense of responsibility for her safety. But the complexities of royal life, along with his own emotional constraints, left him indecisive and passive. He recounted how he was informed of her death, the moment his world fractured in a way he could never repair. The news, delivered in the early hours, struck him with more than sorrow. It brought a sense of shame, an overwhelming wave of helplessness, and the realization that he had failed to protect the mother of his children. What made Charles's revelation so powerful was not just the factual content, but the way it unraveled a man who had been shaped and confined by an institution that often values appearance over truth. He acknowledged that the royal family, under immense public scrutiny, operated with a level of emotional repression that had become second nature. To admit vulnerability was to admit weakness, and that weakness could undermine the entire foundation of the monarchy. It was a culture that had left both Diana and himself isolated in different ways. Her emotional openness, which the public adored, was seen within the palace walls as destabilizing. His restraint, celebrated as duty-bound by some, was viewed as cold and uncaring by others. The contradiction, he now understands, created an impossible situation that had tragic consequences. When he transitioned from speaking about Diana to revealing his cancer diagnosis, the tone shifted from historical to deeply personal. His illness, he said, had forced him to confront his own mortality and reevaluate what he could no longer leave unsaid. The diagnosis had become a crucible in which his past was distilled, pressing him to confront memories long buried. It was during the long nights of chemotherapy, lying in sterile hospital rooms and grappling with pain and uncertainty, that Charles began to reflect more openly on Diana's death. He began writing down thoughts, organizing memories, not for the public initially, but for his sons and grandchildren. He wanted them to know that silence was never meant to hide truth. It was meant wrongly to protect them from pain. His battle with cancer, as he described it, was not just a medical ordeal, but an emotional reckoning. For the first time, the future king found himself as vulnerable as the rest of humanity. He lost weight. He lost hair. He lost most of all the illusion of invincibility. It was during these moments of weakness that the past came surging forward. The regrets over Diana, the decisions unmade, the words left unsaid. In those hospital rooms, he found the clarity that had eluded him for decades. The truth, he realized, was not a weapon to be feared, but a balm that could finally begin to heal generations of royal wounds. As he spoke of his diagnosis, he emphasized the human cost of keeping up appearances. The pressure to remain stoic in public often came at the expense of personal health. He had ignored symptoms, pushed through pain, and dismissed medical advice, all in the name of royal duty. It was a pattern he recognized in his own father and ancestors, men who treated vulnerability as an enemy. Now, facing an uncertain future, Charles made it clear that he would not repeat that legacy. Speaking openly about both his illness and his past failures was his way of breaking the chain, of refusing to let history repeat itself. His admission marked a rare moment when the institution of monarchy intersected with raw humanity. It forced the public to see him not just as a figurehead, but as a man who had suffered, erred, and perhaps most importantly, learned. His illness, though devastating, had liberated him in unexpected ways. It allowed him to reclaim his voice and to confront the events surrounding Diana's death with a clarity and honesty he had never before mustered. It was not redemption in the traditional sense, but it was a reckoning, a long overdue confrontation with the truth. The implications of his revelations rippled far beyond personal catharsis. For the monarchy, it represented a crossroads. The traditional values of restraint and secrecy were now in direct conflict with a world that demands transparency and emotional honesty. Charles's admission raised difficult questions about how the royal family would adapt in an age of social media, 24-hour news cycles, and a generation less tolerant of silence and pretense. The choice to speak out was not merely about Diana or his health, it was about redefining what it means to be a royal in the 21st century. In revealing these truths, Charles dismantled the narrative that had long protected the royal family from deeper scrutiny. He exposed not only personal vulnerabilities, but also the institutional shortcomings that allowed tragedy to unfold unchecked. It was a painful but necessary process, and one that could potentially usher in a new era of emotional accountability within the monarchy. No longer could the royal family hide behind protocol and public statements. With this revelation, the bar was raised for honesty and empathy. For those who had long suspected that more lay beneath the surface of Diana's death, Charles's words confirmed what intuition had whispered for years, that the tragedy was not a simple matter of chance, but the result of a convergence of pressures, failures, and silences. While he did not point fingers, his candor suggested complicity in the broadest sense, a collective failure of understanding, compassion, and courage. In owning his part of that failure, Charles took the first step toward restoring some measure of trust between the public and the institution he represents. His cancer diagnosis, though deeply personal, became a symbolic turning point in the narrative. It reminded the public that behind the royal titles and ceremonial garb are human beings susceptible to the same fears, regrets, and frailties as anyone else. By connecting his health crisis with the emotional weight of Diana's loss, Charles invited the world to witness a rare act of vulnerability, one that transcended the boundaries of royalty and reached into the universal experience of grief, illness, and reconciliation. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us? What are your thoughts on King Charles revealing the truth about Diana and his cancer? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.